In this episode of The Retirement Spy, host Duncan interviews Chris Johnson, a retired professional who has turned his passion for pickleball into a career of professional pickleball referee. They discuss Chris's transition from a 45-year in chemical industry to retirement, his introduction to pickleball, and how he became involved in refereeing at a professional level. The conversation also touches on the growth of pickleball as a sport, the challenges faced by referees in the pickleball industry, and reflections on life and retirement planning. Welcome to this week's episode of The Retirement Spy. My name is Duncan and I'm your host. We use this as a collaborative platform for those entering phase 2 of life and are ready to embrace the chapter of life with gusto and an attitude of carpe diem. You can find out more about The Retirement Spy at www.theretirementspy.com or send us ideas and topics to info@theretirementspy.com. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Chris Johnson, who I met or had the pleasure of meeting in Spain last month. When I learned that Chris was retired, a delightful conversation about his hobby came to light, and it's the focal point of today's podcast episode. Specifically, Chris has taken his passion for pickleball and parlayed it into a paid position traveling the world as a pickleball referee. How unique is that? Chris, tell us a little bit about your phase 1 career before you got into this and give us a background perspective on you.
Okay, yeah. My career was spent mostly in the chemical industry and got a degree in chemistry out of college and wanted to do something with it, but found that I really didn't like working in the lab. So I like people, and so sales kind of became a natural outlet for me. And so I was in basically specialty chemical sales for 45 years, and it involved a lot of travel. And so one of the things that we thought about going into retirement was I needed to find out if my wife really liked me or not. But anyway, a lot of travel as part of that and a lot of work in industrial areas. I was in paper mills quite a bit, water and wastewater treatment facilities, anything that used specialty chemicals. We sold a lot to the cosmetics industry. And so that's what I did for most of my career.
And you retired at what age?
I retired at 65.
Perfect.
And my original plan was to retire at 58, and I was 58 in 2008. And if you remember what happened in 2008, a lot of my portfolio went south.
All of our portfolios went south.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that delayed my retirement until I was 65. And I was fortunate at about the time I was ready to retire, our company had a downsizing. And so I was offered a retirement package. And so I took that package and then was able to hire back on as a consultant half time for them. So I kind of slid into retirement. It wasn't as abrupt maybe as some people experience.
What a great way to do it. I think you've hit the best of all worlds because retirement can be very abrupt. And the idea of working as a consultant or having one toe in the water really helps the transition, doesn't it?
It does, for sure. Because it's a pretty stark reality when all of a sudden you realize that paycheck is not coming in at the end of the month. And at the time that I released, I was actually making a call down in Oregon, and it stopped for lunch on my way back, and I handed them my company credit card, and it was no good.
That's painful. It's road memory, right? It's like, this is what I do. Here's the company card, and it gets cut off. You're like, wait a minute, that's not fair.
Yeah, it's not working anymore.
Hey, question, looking back on, 65, what did you envision doing in retirement? Had you given conscious thought to say, okay, here's my 40-hour void of a work week. Here's what I had planned to do. Had you put thought into that?
I put some thought into it. I don't think I got quite as specific as you're talking about saying, okay, I've got to fill this amount of time. Mine was more general. Couple things. My wife and I are both Christians, and so I envisioned us doing some short-term missionary work, and then also had a hobby of woodworking. And so I thought, okay, I'll do some woodworking when I retire. I had some pretty good equipment at the time, but what I found out as we transitioned to our retirement homes that I didn't take it with me, and so the woodworking hobby kind of died on the vines.
Not every retirement community has a woodworking shop or a place, a garage. That's not always going to be there.
Yeah, not always. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness. Tell me about your passion for pickleball. When did this come about? And have you been playing racket sports all of your life, or where did pickle come from in your life?
Yeah, I was a racquetball player earlier on. And so I've always been involved in sports. So I've enjoyed sports and liked the competition. And when racquetball's kind of dwindled off and I stopped playing. I really didn't have another competitive outlet. And when we moved into our community here, they had 20 pickleball courts and over 1,000 people in the pickleball club. And so it was just kind of
Well,
natural.
let me repeat that.
Yeah,
1,000. Did I hear that correctly?
yeah. Well, now we've got 1,800. But
Wow.
but when we first moved here, it was about 1,000, and we've expanded our courts. So we have 36 courts within our community. And so originally we hadn't intended to retire into a retirement community. We bought a home in Bend, Oregon that was just in a regular neighborhood. We kind of thought, well, we'll use that as our summer home and or winter home, whatever. There's a lot of recreation in Bend. And we thought, okay, we'll do that and we'll keep our place in Olympia, Washington, and just go between the two. Well, that all changed. Jerry's stepdad owned a place here in Pebble Creek, which is in Goodyear, Arizona, the suburb of Phoenix. And we visited him a few times and we thought, hey, we kind of like it there and we like the
Yeah.
community. So in essence, we've transitioned here to Pebble Creek full time.
This is a good question. How did your choice of retirement locations influence your introduction to pickleball or vice versa?
Okay, well, again, being here in a community that was already pretty actively into the pickleball, I just started playing, and it becomes addictive. And I think most of the people that you find that play pickleball will say that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you go from playing 1 or 2 days a week to playing 5 or 6 days a week, and it just becomes addictive. And so I think in any retirement community, I take a look at the one that we're in. It's a pretty good sized community, 6,000 homes, and there are clubs for everything that you can. There's got to be 150 clubs for anything you can think of, from quilting to cars to you name it, to playing Uno. And so I think from a retirement perspective, being in a retirement community like that enables you, no matter what your interest is, you can find something to do. And from that, your social network grows. And we found that was really important. We developed a social network here in 6 months that we didn't develop in Bend for 3 or 4 years.
Well,
So,
and you were traveling all the time. So,
yeah.
how do you build community when you're traveling as much as I'm sure you did?
Yeah, right. So anyway, I think that to us that's been a real benefit. And so then once you establish those friendships, and a lot of our friendships obviously are people that play pickleball, and so you establish those friendships, and it's kind of like the Cheers bar when you show up to the pickleball court, right?
The
So
big
anyway, that's yeah,
the biggest advocate I know within my group of pickleball is an orthopedic surgeon. And I laughingly say that. I said, "Do you play pickleball?" And he goes, "No." He says, "But my business has gone up tremendously because of pickleball."
right.
And
lot, lot of
it,
injuries.
well, there is. And I laugh at this. A good friend of ours at 4th of July, we were finishing our last round of pickleball and our hostess fell and broke her wrist. It was just so sad. And, it's a wake up. You just have to be careful because you can hurt yourself walking around the block, let alone playing pickleball. You just have to
Yeah,
be careful.
yeah.
So, question, referee. Pickleball is growing so fast. I don't think people really understand that it's become professional. It's become big bucks now. Celebrities are sponsoring teams. How did you find your way from pickleball player to being a referee in professional leagues?
Well, it was a little bit of a journey. When I first started out, they were holding tournaments here at the club, and they put out a call for line judges. And so I thought, well, that doesn't sound too bad. I can go be a line judge, and it's pretty innocuous, and you're volunteering a little bit, so it all sounded good. And so I remember it was a class that I sat through that was, I think, 2 or 3 hour class where they explained the rules, they explained how to line judge and what the requirements were. And I remember sitting in that class thinking, I never, ever want to be a referee. I said, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And then from there, one of my good friends was a referee, and he said, you ought to just try it, to just give it a try and see what you think of it. I kind of equate refereeing to law enforcement a little bit. So, you're 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 administering the rules, and I'm a bit of a rule follower. So I think that kind of matched my personality a little bit. And so from there, okay, so I always talk to my wife Jerry about this. I said, okay, when I started refereeing, I was refereeing 3-day tournaments, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I would be done at 3:30 in the afternoon. And now I'm refereeing tournaments that go 7 days, and I'm usually done at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so it kind of just progressed. What really happened, there are really three major pickleball leagues. The PPA, which is probably the premier pickleball league with the highest level players. The APP is kind of like, they're professional players, but it's more like a AAA level if you wanted to compare it to baseball.
Farm league, farm teams.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they're professional players, but they aren't the same caliber as the PPA players. And then there's Major League Pickleball, which I think you alluded to a little bit earlier, that's actually team play. And so a lot of high-level sports people and celebrities own these pickleball teams. And they usually their league is about 2 months during the summertime, and they draft players, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I don't know if they can generate the kind of fan loyalty that some of the other major sports do, because the players change all the time. The team will draft all new players at the beginning of next year. And
It's like,
so,
sounds like the SEC football that we're so accustomed to down here in Georgia.
yeah. So anyway, what happened is a friend of mine from Minnesota was looking. I guess I should explain first that as you go through this process, there are different training levels of referees. You start out as a level 1, you work up to a level 2, and then you work up to a certified referee. And so at the time, I had already earned my certification, and it probably takes about a year and a half to do that. You have to have so much tournament experience. You have to have refereed so many tournaments, and then you have to be evaluated. You have on-court evaluations where they evaluate how well you do. And so it's a pretty involved process. So at the time, I had a good friend who was a level 2 referee actually, no, I take that back. He was a level 1 referee that wanted to get some experience. His son lived in Minneapolis, and he looked at a tournament. It was a PPA tournament. We knew nothing at all about PPA. And it was a PPA tournament, and he looked at it and he said, they're asking for 40 refs and they've got 13. And he said, we ought to go up there. We're going to get a lot of experience if they've only got 13 refs. I said, that sounds like a good idea. So we went up, stayed in his son's house, used his son's car, and refereed for a week at a PPA tournament, which again, we knew nothing at all about. Well, all of a sudden, they're throwing us out on the courts with professional players, and it's kind of like sink or swim, right? And so anyway, from there, once I got to know Don Stanley, the head referee for PPA, did a decent job for him. He just, I kept applying for tournaments that the PPA was doing, and it just kind of grew from there. And then 2 years ago, they formed a group of 13 refs that primarily work center court and grandstand court for the PPA tournaments. And so we'll rotate between center court and grandstand court pretty much for the whole week.
So give me an example. Having not been to a professional pickleball league, you're in Virginia Beach last week and you're there
Right.
all week long. What's the attendance in center court of a major pickleball event? Is it akin to Wimbledon, or is it?
I would say the capacity typically runs around, I don't know, maybe 1,000 to 1,500 people in center court. And then you've also got the grandstand court, which probably maybe have a capacity of a couple hundred, 200 or 300. And so people that are playing in the tournament obviously can go watch for free, but then other people that want to come in, they buy a ticket and go to center court. They would typically figure for a week-long PPA event that they would have about 20 to 25,000 people come through.
That's amazing.
For
That's just absolutely amazing.
and then there'll be the PPA Worlds Championship is in Dallas in about 2.5 or 3 weeks, and they figure that they'll have 50,000 people come through for that.
This is a national league. Is there a certain region that's pickleball friendly? I think everything in terms of a football analogy, where we have the SEC down here, and you think of football, of course, it's the South. Where would anything else be?
Sure.
Sorry to my friend who are Big Ten fans. I apologize to you. But is pickleball thought of as a northern sport, a Western sport? Is it just all over professionally?
I think it's pretty much all over. There are certain pockets. For instance, a lot of the pros live in Florida, and train in Florida. We have a few that live and train here in the desert in Phoenix area, and then some in California. But it's pretty spread out. I would say most of these people have come up through the tennis ranks. A lot of them have played professional tennis and just have transitioned over to pickleball. So in terms of referees, there are definite pockets of referees. There are, I think, certified referees in the country, there's about 250. I would say three-fourths of those live either in the Phoenix area or in Naples, Florida, and along the East Coast, North Carolina, that area.
Well, I was asking the question. It's interesting because you're in Phoenix, but you
Hmm.
went to Virginia Beach as a referee. So if
Right.
what you're saying is true, is everybody's in Phoenix, everybody's down in Florida, you're going to travel to some tournaments, or you're going to have more often than not.
Yeah. Well, especially for the PPA tournaments because they're all over the country. We've been to from Seattle to down the coast to San Clemente and Newport Beach, and they've had a couple here in Mesa. Like I said, we've been up in Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Daytona Beach. So if you want to travel, if you want to referee the pros, you have to travel like that.
When is the season? So football season begins in the fall, and there's a definite season. Does pickleball have a season? You mentioned a couple of months. When is it?
I would say that it's pretty much year round. There's a kind of a lull time in December, but other than that, they start off with the Masters in Palm Springs in early January and pretty much go. And what they'll do is the PPA will go from January through, let's say, May. Then the MLP picks up and goes June, maybe June, July, and partially into August. And then the PPA picks up again now from now until the end of the year. So it's year round pretty much.
Is there an industry equivalent to the Masters at Augusta or Wimbledon? Is there in the pickleball, is there the be all end all tournament is blank? Is there something like that? A grand finale of the year or a big one that everybody wants to be at?
Well, the Worlds in Dallas is the big finale for the year, but it's interesting because there's some competition to see who is going to be the governing body for pickleball. And so you've got the USAPA, which is the governing body for all amateur pickleball. And the PPA is pretty much PPA and MLP are combined. They're owned by the same folks, and they pretty much control the professional side of things. But in order for it to become an Olympic sport, there has to be one governing body for the whole sport for the country. And so
Uh,
there's some competition to see who that's going to be.
well, it's not like one of the three is going to roll over and say, okay, I'm giving into this. And I know the
Right.
industry would like to go to the next level. I don't know. This is like herding cats. How do you get three organizations together saying, hey, we want the betterment of the game. Let's go to the Olympics. Who's going
Right.
to acquiesce? I imagine that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is for sure. And it also revolves around training. The USAPA or the governing body for the referees, the referee training, the rule book. They make the rule changes every year. And so I have heard through the grapevine that the PPA is looking at doing their own rule book because there are some rule differences between the amateurs and the professionals. And so
As an example, to give perspective, what would be an example of an amateur professional difference?
a real clear one is a let serve,
Mhm.
where the ball hits the net, goes into the proper service court. In the professionals, we replay let serves. In the amateurs, they play those. It's not a replay. So if the ball hits the net, goes into the service court, you continue to play.
They still call it the kitchen. Is that the appropriate term for that no man zone?
Right. There's a zone that's 7 feet from the net on each side of the court, and you can't be standing in that zone when you volley the ball out of the air.
Got it. Well, I'd ask the question, in my infancy in pickle, I think I've played a handful of times. And the first time I got a lesson, as we're referring to the kitchen, I did my YouTube video before going to my first pickle lesson.
Yeah.
And somebody and the instructor says, all right, we don't say kitchen anymore. And I was confused because I call it kitchen. And I think this is where you have a different class of people who are like, wow, that's what they used to call it. You don't call it. And I didn't know if it was considered a derogatory term and they're changing it, or somebody decided they just want to put a different nomenclature on it.
But yeah, it's historically been called the kitchen, but the official term is the non-volley zone.
Is it changed because there's something, or are we offending somebody when we call it the kitchen? And now I'm asking seriously because I don't know. And I felt silly as the instructor was saying, well, it used to be called the kitchen, Mr. Gibbs. It's not called the kitchen anymore.
I don't know. I still call it the kitchen occasionally, but as we're refereeing, it would be a fault in the non-volley zone.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. A question, what is your schedule like? It sounds like there's a tremendous need for what you're doing, and do you have the ability to regulate your schedule? It sounds like you can be busier than you ever were before retirement? And is this a good thing or is this a bad thing?
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think, like you say, you can be as busy as you want to be. There are some requirements. The referees that referee on center court and the grandstand court are called PRs. So they've given us another designation within PPA. And there aren't specific requirements on how many matches you need to commit to a year, but primarily you have to commit to at least half of the matches. Now, PPA will have about 26 matches during the year, so you know, one or two a month, so in that ballpark. So
But two
I
a month for you could be Virginia Beach was a week. Two a month is 2 weeks out on the road, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if you take a look at my schedule from now until the end of the year, except well, I guess December's a little bit less, but I'll be doing one every other week. So I'll be going to Las Vegas this Sunday, and then being out there for a week. Then a week.
I'll meet you at the Cosmopolitan. We can go gamble.
Okay. Are you going to be out there?
No, I just got back. I was there last week.
Okay. By the way, I love the Cosmopolitan.
So fun.
Yeah. So I would say that I would, as a PR, I would probably do somewhere around 15 tournaments a year. So a little over one a month.
Wow, what does Mama have to say about this? I know Mama's joining you, but I know that's a lot of time commitment that may take her away from mahjong or some other things she may have going.
Yeah. Well, it is a commitment, and it's actually one thing that we talked about when they set up the PR program 2 years ago. We talked about it, and I said I'd like to try it for 2 years. We knew that there was going to be a time commitment. She actually has gone back to work also, so it is eased a little of that burden. And the other thing is, as I told you in my previous career, I traveled a lot. So she's used to kind of fending for herself a little bit and being on her own. So that part of it hasn't caused too much trouble. But at the end of this year, I'm going to cut back. So I've made my 2 year commitment, and I'll cut back to doing less pros, more amateurs.
Okay, good for you. Tell me a little bit about origins of pickleball. When I think about pickleball, I think the stereotype is it's an old person's game, but I did a little research before our cast today, and it's diametrically opposed, meaning people over the age of 60 is very popular, but it's also popular with the 25 to the 35-year-old crowd,
Sure.
tremendously popular. And so I remember a few years ago talking to my rackets people, and I'm not a tennis ball player. I said, "Hey, do you do pickle?" They said, "No, I'm not retired yet." Kind of putting a nose up in the air to pickleball. But tell me about the people you're seeing because it's all over the board, right?
It's all, excuse me, what?
It's all over the board as far as age, abilities. This
It
is
is
not an
for
old
sure.
person's game.
Yeah. And actually, it's becoming a younger person's game. I mean, you take a look at the pros, they're all mid to late 20s. And you see a lot. One of the things I really like about refereeing is going to these tournaments and being in that tournament atmosphere. There's just a little bit of charge to the air and a little bit of excitement. And, I enjoy that. And a lot of that is the younger people that you see there. And actually, they have a whole juniors part of the tournament that PPA really emphasizes. So they'll have 12 and unders, 14 and unders, and 16 and unders. And you should see these kids play. I mean, I don't want to be playing against them.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are people making conscious career decisions? So you have let's call it a conventional track of being a tennis player, and you're down
Mhm.
in Florida and you're going to the schools and you have the ability to go to the next level, but maybe you're not going to be at that elite stage. Is there a process that you're witnessing where people are like, no, I'm not going to do tennis. I'm going to go pickleball as a professional player. And I don't know, I don't think parity in money, but is there conscious career decisions within the racket industry that you're saying that people are going one way or the other?
Sure. And it's not from pickleball to tennis. It's from, you know, the tennis players have such a good fundamental grasp, especially ground strokes. And if you've got that stroke, the rest of it you can develop pretty easily. And so you find these people that are coming over from tennis, like Paris Todd and Tyra Black and Christian Alshon, they develop their game so quickly. It's just amazing. In 6 months, they're playing at a 6'5" pro level. And again, a lot of it is just the fundamentals, especially of tennis. When they've learned those fundamentals, it's
Tell me about perspective, because whether you're a plumber, a doctor, or an attorney, I'm always curious about what money is involved in a career. If
Mhm.
you're a professional pickleball player at elite levels, sponsorship aside, What's a purse for winning a tournament one week?
It's a little bit of a difficult question right now because there were 2 years ago, there was this big contract negotiation. And so there was a bidding war between the MLP and PPA to sign these players under contract. And so what they did is they gave away a lot of money under contracts. And so the prize money is right now is really low. Now that's all switching because these contracts are expiring. And so what they're doing is the contract now levels now are lower, and the prize money is going up.
Huh?
But to give you an idea of like average salary, I think the average salary of a professional pickleball player is around 260,000 a year,
So
and that includes endorsements.
got it. Wow,
Okay,
not bad.
and compared to I looked up the WNBA average salary is somewhere around 120,000.
Yeah, relative to I mean, every other sport from football to NBA is
Yeah,
minimum salary is
yeah,
$1 million or whatever it
yeah.
is now. It's kind of
So
silly.
the two top players in the world, Ben Johns and Annalie Waters, I think their take in 2024 was around 3.5 million
Wow.
each. And again, a lot of that is endorsement money, um, but still they're making a pretty good living.
Yeah,
And even the lower, if you go down to the list of the top 10 men players and the top women players, down at the bottom of the list, they're still in the high six figures.
that's amazing. But
Yeah.
this just entertainment. Question. And I'm giving the perspective of just watching the Ryder Cup, which I was an American embarrassed about
Yeah.
the action of our fans. What is the environment like for you as a referee? And when good calls and bad calls are made, do the players throw temper tantrum? Is the audience for you against you? What's the environment like for you as a referee, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it can be a little bit toxic sometimes, but I guess as a referee, you kind of have to have a little bit of a thick skin. There are times when the calls are bad. And also, now that we have video challenges, it's interesting. Pickleball is, I think, the only sport where the athletes make their own line calls. And so, they do that in pickleball. But on center court and grandstand court, we have video challenges. So if your opponent makes a call that you think is incorrect, you can challenge it. We go back and look at the videos. Well, one of the things that we're dealing with is the equipment isn't necessarily the same quality as the equipment they use for tennis. And so sometimes the views that you get aren't as good. You're extrapolating, okay, when did that ball hit? And so you're making judgment calls that, it could be a toss up that you're making a judgment call on. And so we've had occasion, what they'll do is they'll show the ball as it hits the line, and then we make our judgment call, and then they'll flash that up onto the big screen on the court.
No,
And so there have been times where, okay, I'm the video ref. I call the ball in and they show it on the big screen and it looks clearly out. And so then the players, they start going off the rails. Look at that ball's out. And of course the crowd is going crazy too. So yeah, there are times when it gets a little bit dicey. It's funny they have different levels of punishment or whatever you want to call it. You can give technical warnings and technical fouls for different behavior
for the players, you mean?
for the players, right? And so I had a player that was constantly dropping the F bomb in a tournament in a match. So I warned him. I gave him first technical warning, and I gave him a second technical warning. Well, on the second technical warning, you lose a point. And so then at that point, he really came unglued, and this wasn't on center court, but it was on a streaming court. So they were, it was being streamed. So it was the next day, my daughter called me. She goes, "Dad," she said, "do you know you're on TikTok?"
Did you go viral?
And it was funny because somebody had clipped that section of the stream out, and then they'd put in closed captioning. And so everything we were saying was in closed caption underneath it. It was pretty funny.
This may be the reason you're only going to do this for 2 years. Jerry will
Yeah.
say, no more. We're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah. And so there is a little pushback from the players, especially I think sometimes they don't understand what can be challenged and what can't be challenged. And so they'll want to challenge something and you have to explain to them, no, sorry, you can't challenge it because of this reason or whatever. And so you get some pushback from them on that. So yeah, so there's a little pressure that way. And obviously, from a focus standpoint, it keeps you hyper focused because you don't want to make a mistake, obviously. And I think when you talk about pressure, and there's also pressure from the other side in that that you're being evaluated every time you step on the court. And so, the head referee and the people that are in control of referees, they want you to be perfect. Well, you and I know that ain't going to happen. So that's the other thing that I guess you have to be kind of aware of. Do you want to put yourself in that kind of pressure situation? How do you handle it, and how long do you want to handle it? That's one of the reasons I think that the end of the year will be just fine for me.
Another thing that somebody had said, Spy here, having grown up in the 80s, we
Uh,
lived a different life because there was no iPhone that could film everything that we were doing, thank God.
right.
So to your point, your daughter calling you up, say, "Hey, Dad, guess what? You're on TikTok." This is probably the last thing I ever want my son to say. "Hey, Dad, I saw you on TikTok." I'd be like, "Oh, no."
Yeah,
Whatever I'm doing professionally or anything, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I say this as I'm launching a podcast. I'm out
yeah.
there. I hope I don't have spinach in my teeth, and I hope I'm not embarrassing my family. But I think we're
Well,
doing okay.
yeah, it was funny because when I started doing the professional circuit, I told my wife Jerry, I said, one of my goals is to not have anything go viral.
Well, it can be good or bad. You never know. You could go
Yeah,
viral, and all of a sudden, good things come out of it.
yeah. So
Usually not. Hey,
yeah,
listen, what a great interview today. I am using you as a guinea pig. And for the audience, I've already teed Chris up for the question I'm going to ask. And I'm going to give credit to a friend of mine that I was out with Las Vegas last week who was giving me some coaching on our podcast and said, you need to ask this question of everybody you interview, not to put them on the spot, but to prompt our audience listening today and always as to how to approach retirement. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you one last question before we go.
sure.
And this is the first time we've done this, so you're our guinea pig. And as I say, it was prompted by a good friend of mine. But here's the question. When do you think you are going to die? And for the audience perspective, the reason I'm putting Chris on the spot is for our audience, as we approach retirement, it's so important to ask that question of yourselves because it puts perspective about how you want to spend the remaining time that you think you have or may not have. And we know it's not a definitive answer, but we're asking the questions just so we can get everybody thinking so that you can plan your retirement, have more fun sooner than later and with more impact.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that question puts in perspective is, like you said, okay, I'm 75 right now, and if I think, okay, I think maybe I'm going to live to 85. Let's say, okay, so if I think, okay, I've got a good chance of doing that. My parents both died around mid 80s, and so genetically, if my heart holds up, God willing, I'll make it to 85. So I think what that does from my perspective, it says, okay, well, you know, I can still, if I want to plan a cruise or whatever, I can still do that 2 or 3 years out, and I should still have the ability to do that and the energy to do that or whatever. Whereas if I thought really, my health is not good, maybe I've only got 3 or 4 years left. It's going to change my whole planning process. But I think if you ask me that question, I would say that I probably think I'm going to live another 10 years.
Good. You've got a lot of cruising left to do with you and Jerry. Chris, what a great time to spend with you today. And thank our audience for our time that you spent with us today. And remember, please subscribe to our channel here by clicking the link below. Chris, please tell Jerry I said hi. We've enjoyed our time with you, and we look forward to following up more as pickleball grows and we all of a sudden find that you're in the center court again and we can see you on TikTok.
Great. Great. Thanks very much, Duncan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.